Skip Gates is many, many things, including university professor at Harvard, the director of the Center for African and African American Research there. Most people know him also by all your PBS shows. And you have yet another one. You're also a trustee of the Aspen Institute, for which thank you.
Indeed I am. I was his first appointment when he became the head of the Aspen Institute.
I don't know that I appoint trustees, recruit them desperately. You were the first recruit.
The only reason, because I'm on the board, we have our annual Aspen board meeting in the first week of August. So schlepping out here from Boston twice in 1 month is a pain. So I almost never have come to the Ideas Festival. And the reason I came this year was to say something, which was to thank Walter.
Oh, thank you.
Now you got to be quiet. You got to thank Walter, first of all, for appointing me to this wonderful board. I didn't know very much about the Aspen Institute at all. And, I'm on several boards, and I've never seen a more perfect match, a more perfect relation between a think tank and its director. They have a symbiotic relation. And I've watched over the last 14 years Aspen grow into the cosmic entity that it has become. And it's all because of you. This place reflects your personality in such a beautiful way.
Thank you.
It's great.
And I love you. And now let's get to you. Why don't you show us a clip first, and then we can get started.
Okay,
why don't
you want me to
a clip from the show, because this is basically, well, you can introduce what the show is.
Sure. I'm blessed to have some very good friends who are very smart. And one of them is a guy named Ken Chenault. Ken Chenault is the CEO of Amex. Same generation, roughly the same age. He's what we call race man. He studied African-American history and went to Harvard Law School. So he cares very much about the African-American and African condition, which is where I live. And I went to see him after we had done Many Rivers Across, which was 500 years of African-American history. And my friends at PBS, Paula Kerger, right there in the front row, Beth Hoppe, right there, said, all right, give us a list of things that you'd like to do, fantasize. So I made a list of 10 documentaries about the Black experience that I'd really like to do. And I asked Ken for 45 minutes, which was really valuable to the CEO of Amex, right? And I walked in and I said, look, I'm not hustling you for money. I just want your ideas. And I showed him the list, and he said, no, the most important ideas are not there. The most important is for you to do the last 50 years of Black history, since 1965, our history. And frankly, Paula, it had never occurred to me to do that. It never occurred to me that our lifetime was historical, right? Because we're living in it. And then I thought, my God, 1965, I was 15. 50 years before was 1915 and World War I, which was ancient history. And that must be how that era appears to young Americans, white and Black and Latino. So I decided to start with 1965. And the conceit is, what would you tell Martin Luther King if he came back? And he'd say, Walter, what's happened since I've been gone? And you'd say, hey, Dr. King, you're looking good. It's nice to see you again. A lot of stuff has happened that's going to blow your mind. And remember, 65 is a pivotal year because it starts with Malcolm X being assassinated. Everybody forgets that in February. Then in March, it's Pettus Bridge. And then Watts in August. And then in the fall, the first Black person to star in a weekly drama. Who was that? Bill Cosby and I Spy. I've had people say, you got to take Bill Cosby out of Black history. I go, I can't take him out of Black history. But that was an amazing year that starts with Malcolm X and ends with I Spy. And the reason I realized in retrospect that I aspired to be a Rhodes Scholar, I was a Mellon finally, and I went to Cambridge, was because Bill Cosby was a Rhodes Scholar in that documentary. So we go from 1965.
You mean in the show?
Yeah, in the show, sorry, in I Spy. And we go from that amazing year through the birth of affirmative action, when people like me integrated historically white universities. I went to Yale in 1969, one of 96 Black men and women to diversify Yale. Why would I say that? Because Yale, class of 66, had 6 Black men to graduate. The class that entered with me in 69 had 96. Was there a genetic blip in the race and all of a sudden there are 90 smart Black people who hadn't existed before? Yale had racist quotas on black people, on Jews. Yale even had, until 1963, had a quota on Roman Catholics. And guess who's in my class? Kurt Schmoke became the first black mayor of Baltimore. Sheila Jackson Lee, my good friend, who's Congresswoman from Barbara Jordan's district in Houston. And a nerdy pre-med guy. You know, we didn't know him well. He didn't hang very much. What's his name? Ben.
I can't remember him now.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to him?
I think he was in the cabinet now for him. Ben Carson was, and his wife Candy. We were all there at the same time. So the long and the short of it is, because of affirmative action, the black middle class has doubled since Martin Luther King was killed. The black upper middle class has quadrupled. That's the good news. What's the bad news? In 1970, the percentage of black children living at or beneath the poverty line, 41%. What was it the last time it was taken? 2 years ago? 38%. So that we have this paradox. We have a class divide within the black community. So for some of us, it's the best of times. And for others of us, it's the worst of times. And I wanted to do a documentary charting the rise of black superstars like Oprah, Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, the first black president elected twice. And on the other hand, the dramatic and pernicious rise of the black prison population. The rise in the percentage, 33% of all prisoners in the United States are black men. An average black man has a chance 1 in 3 of going to prison. And what is it for white men? 1 in 17. How did we get at this paradoxical situation where some of us have more freedom and more wealth than any previous generation of black people ever could have imagined? And on the other hand, where there is maybe even less hope for so many black people, and what do we do about it?
And before we show the clip, you were coming out of a series that won Emmys and everything else on 500 years.
Yeah.
So explain how that worked.
Yeah, we started with Spanish Florida, and the first black independent town near St. Augustine. And we took it from there all the way up to 2015. So basically we went from 1515 to 2015 and told the history of the black person in North America. And the response was amazing. Won an Emmy, won a Peabody, NAACP Emmy Award, which is the hardest award ever to win, as every black person in this room knows. And so we did very well.
Let's show a clip if we can.
Okay, great.
Hidden beneath the data was a frightening fact. As the black middle class followed white Americans in moving out of inner cities, the poorest African Americans were becoming increasingly isolated, socially, geographically, and economically. In essence, class differences were fracturing black America.
For the first time, really in American history, you will begin to see classes of African Americans living in different places. Because prior to that, the options were so few and limited, no matter how much you made, for the most part, you were gonna be buying, shopping, going to school, and working and living within the confines of a black community.
Integration had its downside. It removed the role models. It removed some of the stabilizing personalities and characters, and involved business people and doctors and lawyers. It moved them out of the community.
In the 1950s, black communities were the most civilized communities in America. There was ties of empathy and bonds of sympathy, unbelievable embrace of others who came in out of the 70s. We don't have neighborhoods as much as we got hoods.
As black America transformed, a sociologist named William Julius Wilson began mapping its growing class divide, looking at how the poorest among us were being left behind. At the time, his work was controversial. Today, it seems clear that he was right.
If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, who still questions the power of our democracy, tonight is your answer. It's been a long time coming, but tonight, because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America.
The victory offered African Americans of all generations a chance to celebrate and reflect. To young people like my daughters, it seemed to promise a new age. To civil rights veterans like my friend Charlene Hunter Galt, it felt like the culmination of a lifelong struggle. And Obama's inauguration was something she had to see in person.
I had to be there on that really cold day as a small part of that movement that made his election possible.
The President-elect of the United States, Barack H. Obama.
It was a wonderful camaraderie, but I had to walk away because the people that I felt the closest to some of them couldn't be there. And I could. I found myself humming that old freedom song, you know, we've come a mighty long way. And then I went back and listened to the first Black president take the oath of office.
I, Barack Hussein Obama.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
The idea that there is a Black president, that Black people can go out and say, there's somebody that looks like me in the White House, that there's a family that looks like me in the White House, it is huge.
I'm proud of Barack Obama. I'm proud that 4 Black women and girls live in the White House. I think there's something absolutely awesome about that. You know, there are Black hair care products in the White House. It matters representationally, it matters culturally, it matters.
That image of seeing him on every TV every day, being the leader of the free world, it showed that America has made significant progress. You better believe no matter what his policies are, and no matter what he does with it, you can never change the fact that he has changed this country and the world forever.
Thank you.
And
Thank
still
you.
I rise. Cool.
Thank you.
Very good. Congratulations yet again.
Thank you.
You know, episode.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I'd like to thank our people, the corporations that made this possible, in addition to PBS and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Bank of America, our lead sponsor, and Johnson & Johnson, our founding sponsor. So please give it up for our sponsor.
Episode 3 is particularly tough because it's about the class divide within the Black community, and it mirrors in some ways a class divide that also happened in that period within the white community. Tell me how you now wrestle with this notion of both race and class.
Well, we use metaphors, and many Black scholars, many of my friends in this audience, and they know that we use a metaphor for Black America as the Black community. That community is comprised of 42 million people. There are far more Black Americans than all the people in Canada, but we don't think of that. You know, Black America is a country. Martin Delany in 1852, I believe, said that Black America was a nation within a nation. And we've always had class fissures. Even under the slave regime, we had, you know, famously class house Negroes and field Negroes, and then we have mulattoes. You know, a funny thing about, you know, my mainstay on PBS is Finding Your Roots. And one of the most surprising things that we've learned from the DNA component of Finding Your Roots is that the 3 DNA companies that we use have never tested an African American. At this point, I probably should say rarely, but as of a year ago, they had never tested an African American who was 100% black. No matter how phenotypically African or Negroid, as they used to say, any black person you might know, they have a significant amount of white ancestry. Why? Because of slavery and because of rape, or cajoled sexuality, or sometimes voluntary sexual relations across the color line. So that produced the mulatto class, and you know, no one knows this better than you. We were talking about it last night at dinner, of the gens de couleur,
Yeah.
the men of color and women of color in New Orleans. We all know that. We even had black slave owners. We know that too. So, but still, under segregation, all blacks, no matter what your class, were equal before the law. So if you have a law that says all black shall or all black shan't, it didn't matter if you were a doctor or if you were a janitor, you couldn't sit down at Woolworths. You couldn't stay in a hotel. You couldn't go to your alma mater, Harvard. See what I mean?
But wait, let's go back real quick, because
Okay.
that was not the case until Plessy.
Yeah,
That was a very strong race line gets drawn then.
In then 1896. In fact, the next documentary that we're doing for PBS is Reconstruction and the Birth of Jim Crow. And if you think about it, it's a mirror for what just happened to us. I know many of you looked at those clips and thought, God, look how young Barack looked. And that was 1,000 years ago. You know, America has changed. Changed what? To elect Donald Trump? Wow, what a change. Nobody could even imagine what has happened to our country when we saw that inauguration. I was there freezing my buns off.
It was very cold.
And the reason that Reconstruction and Redemption, as it's properly called, or the birth of Jim Crow, is an analog to what's just happened, is that we had 11 years of maximum black freedom between 1866 and 1877, followed by the rollback of Reconstruction, which gave birth to Jim Crow. And Jim Crow laws were invented starting in the 1890s with the Separate Car Act in Louisiana, and it culminated to apex was Plessy v. Ferguson, which is 1896.
And Plessy, as you know, was an upper class, very light-skinned.
He didn't even look black.
1/8 octoroon.
Yeah.
And nobody would have drawn that color line, but then the Supreme Court does.
Yeah, the Supreme Court does, and did until we had the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and then Loving in 67.
Right.
So that it took all those years to...
And Brown v. I mean,
and
which
Brown v.
overturns
Board,
Plessy.
yeah, which started the whole thing off.
But
So it's very important to trace that period in American history from the Emancipation Proclamation, really, until 1915, certainly through Plessy.
can you do, as sort of a historian, a thought experiment, which is what would have happened if Plessy had gone the other way and we hadn't drawn a legal color line?
Oh my God, wouldn't it have been great? Oh, and you have to add one more thing, 40 acres and a mule.
Right.
What would happen? The most radical thing that could have happened in the history of the United States, other than giving women the right to vote, would have been redistributing land of the planter class in the South and giving the disenfranchised non-citizens, the slaves, their acreage. Property always was related to freedom and rights in the United States. You know this. Who could vote at first? White males who had property. And who couldn't vote? People who didn't have property. So, you know, we didn't have property by and large, and that was the way that it was. So radical redistribution of land would have been the most radical thing to happen. And then to have the rights of people of color affirmed. Well, they were in the Reconstruction Acts, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and then that was all taken away by the Supreme Court, and ultimately by Plessy. If that could have been reaffirmed, then we might have seen a normal class distribution within the black community. That's the best that we can hope for. You can't have 42 million black Americans all living in Aspen. You know, that's not going to happen. So you got to have, all we want, I think that what we aspire to, many of us, is to have the percentage of black people in the working class the same as white people in the working class, and white and black people in the middle class, and white and black people in the upper class. And we certainly do not have that.
And it's going the opposite way, right?
It's going the opposite way.
What's causing the widening of this divide?
What's going, it's the shrinking of the pie. It was easy to support affirmative action when I was applying to Yale, because we had guns and butter, remember that? Mm-hmm. We were going to solve problems. We used to think that poverty was like a medical condition that could be treated with drugs. Lyndon Johnson thought that. MLK thought that. Bobby Kennedy thought that. We didn't realize that it was structural. People on the left realized that it was structural. But most of us in the liberal Democratic center didn't, or the Republican center, and at the time there was a Republican left and center, if they realized that they didn't admit it, that it was a structural part of American capitalism. So you're not going to blow up the system and change it. What system could be better? What we have to do is reform it. And I think that the reason, I'm a West Virginian, and many of you know that. My family has lived, my fourth great grandparents lived 18 miles on three sets of my fourth great grandparents lived 18 miles from where I was born. And they lived in the 18th century. They were born in 1750 and 1760. They all knew each other and they intermarried, right? I don't think that's true for anybody else in this room. So, but I grew up in West Virginia, that well-known center of black culture and history. Right? And every year, as Paul and Beth know, when we screen, we have a big screening party for the new seasons of Finding Your Roots, or our new Black History series in New York. And I reserved 7 seats for these women who went to school with me for 12 years. I met them on the first day of school in first grade. It's an overwhelmingly white town. It's an Irish-Italian paper mill town. So 7 of the women are white, and 1 of them is black. 7 of them last summer told me they were going to vote for Donald Trump, and he was going to be the next president of the United States. They come to our house on Martha's Vineyard to stay for 5 days. And we've stayed in touch, you know, it was great. It's like you and that woman that we heard about. With that Le Mans or Grand Prix or whatever that.
Pontiac.
Yeah, Pontiac. The Soulmobile, we would have called it. And they told me last summer, and Ken Burns and I, my good friend Ken, the king of documentary storytellers, we did a 5-city tour on race 2 years ago. And I told him, stop underestimating this Donald Trump. Because my friends at home were telling me something different than the narrative that my friends at Harvard Square were telling each other, which is Hillary was about to undergo a coronation. Why? Because everybody wants a magic transformation back to the days when we lived in Piedmont, West Virginia, and our parents worked at the paper mill, and we were going to go to college, and that was a sign of generational success. You worked in the labor part of the mill, then you got a job in the craft part of the mill. You made a lot more money per hour. Then you sent your kids to college. They became doctors or lawyers or whatever. And then we all came back and lived in Piedmont. I was going to marry the girl named Brenda Kimmel, was the girl I fell in love with in first grade, right? That world is over. But Donald Trump has convinced people, particularly in places like West Virginia, which was, along with Massachusetts, the most democratic state in the Union until Barack ran. Even my friends said, no, we can't be going there. But they loved.
In the days of Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah, they loved Bobby Kennedy, and they loved Bill. But with Hillary, no way. Because Donald Trump gave them this illusion of being able to go back in the time machine to a world that is gone, which is never, ever going to come back. And I'm worried about, or fascinated by, what's going to happen, how long is it going to take for these people to realize that they were sold a bill of goods? That the mills aren't coming back. In Piedmont, the coal fields in southern West Virginia, the steel mills in Pittsburgh, where, by the way, where I grew up is halfway between Pittsburgh and D.C. So it was a big agricultural area in West Virginia, but between industrial areas. That world is gone. And a lot of people wouldn't move, and they still live there. So class has become, I think, more important than any other single factor to white people, and that wasn't true before.
And do you think that there's a correlation between the widening class divide among white people and the widening class divide among blacks?
It's the same system. Of course there's a correlation. We're all suffering from the same failure to adapt to a 21st century, highly technological world economy, where skills, you have to be trained for skills that are going to equip you for a meaningful economic role in that world. The world that the world of nostalgia that we fantasize about is gone. I liked Astro's, I think
Astro Teller, yeah.
Astro Teller yesterday was talking about, even my brother's a dentist, 3rd generation dentist in our collective extended Gates family. And he said, I was amazed he used that example. He said, you can't even go to dental school and be a dentist and then rest on your laurels for the rest of your life. And Tom Friedman's book said, every 5 years we're going to have new jobs. How do we reform the school system? How that would, you want to know the one, I know this is one of your questions, what would I recommend? We have to have a massive revolution in public education in the United States. That is the only thing that's going to save us. The only thing.
And what would you do in public education?
Well, first of all, instead of busing, I never was a fan of busing, but instead of busing, why? Because I grew up in the country where people were bused and it was really dangerous on little narrow roads and in the snow. So I have my own traumas about that. Which is really irrelevant if I guess if we live in Boston or New York. But what we need to do is not bus black bodies to white schools and white bodies to black schools, bus the dollars from the rich school districts to the poor districts, and that will save, we need to allocate the same amount of money per student, per school district. That is the only way that you can do it.
Now,
and I think, and have, like, what do they call it when you hardship pay for talented, motivated teachers who work in the worst school districts. That's what we have to do.
You mentioned earlier, and I may not have heard it right, so you said one of the reasons the divide is widening, a class divide, is partly the affirmative action being contracted? Is that
yes,
what you mean?
affirmative action. The doors opened and let some of us in. And Alani Guinier, as you know, a friend of yours, my colleague at the Harvard Law School, said affirmative action was a class escalator. So it integrated, diversified institutions like this. You could see the amount of color and the number of women in a room like this. 50 years ago, we wouldn't have been here. Women wouldn't have been represented in such dramatic numbers, and certainly people of color wouldn't. But look at Bakke. Almost as soon as we got historic, unprecedented numbers of people of color at historically white schools, as I call them, like Harvard and Yale, the door slammed. They said, okay, this is enough, and we're going to freeze that number, right? Because there is not an infinite supply of the pie to be redistributed. So the door slammed and everyone was left behind. What else happened? Simultaneously, while we were going to Yale and Harvard, jobs were disappearing from the cities. So that the traditional way of moving from the working class to middle class was through a factory. That work disappeared and went south, and then it went south of the border. And then it went to China or wherever, you know, all kinds of jobs. So you had people who were stuck. And then the schools fell apart. The tax base fell apart. Black mayors were elected. That was good. We had Richard Hatcher, right? We had Andy Young. We had Tom Bradley. But the tax base fell apart because the white people moved to the suburb. All these factors are happening simultaneously.
And how did crime fit into that, the rise of crime in the cities?
C-R-A-C-K, crack. And then the double standard for penalizing black people who possessed certain forms of cocaine. So if you had crack cocaine, you were mandatory drug sentences. If you were a white guy just doing cocaine at a party, you know, you get a hand slap. And that was a racist interpretation of the law. And that led to an unprecedented number, a number that should be repugnant to everybody in this room and everybody in this country. 33% of the prison population is comprised of black males. 1 in 3 black men, 1 in 3 will go to jail. That's ridiculous. That's horrible, as opposed, as I said earlier, to 1 in 17 white men. So that we have this permanent class of disenfranchised people tied to the prison system. It's horrific, but yet we've taken it for granted. We've become inured to it. That's another thing. King would have had a heart attack over that. That didn't exist. We had 100 and, I think, you know, that fact checker, who was the woman who spoke from the Atlantic yesterday?
I know she was great, yeah.
Yeah, she did. I brought a file for the facts.
Yeah.
In case she was here, I could get them right. I think in 1970 we had about 140,000 black prisoners. Now we have 830,000. That's incredible. It's ridiculous.
But one of the themes in episode 3, and I think 2, is the blacks who are making it, either through affirmative action or economically making it, integration allows them to leave behind others, and the people left behind no longer had the structures and role models before.
This is William Julius Wilson's thesis, that in addition to the disappearance of jobs, was the disappearance of the black middle class. Stable social institutions like the church, the Elks, the Links. You know, you'd see Dr. Jones walking down Dr. Carson walking to work down the street in Baltimore going to Johns Hopkins. Now you won't. So that's changed too. And it's left behind disempowered, disenfranchised people whose sons and fathers are gone, or sons will go to jail. The fathers are in jail, in prison. The schools are hopeless. Would you have been you've just finished the brilliant study of Da Vinci, as you told me last night, the genius of geniuses. Would you have finished that if you'd grown up in one of these school districts? One of these.
And it's getting worse. I mean, the divide in education.
And it's getting worse. So if you look at the number at Harvard, we don't have a quota, but basically the same number of black people are admitted every year. And they are all going to do very well, without a doubt. And they're my students. But, black communities have these two parallel classes. And many scholars in this room would say privately, probably not on this stage, that those two lines, class lines, are never going to meet unless something radical happens. Unless there are radical transformations in the socioeconomic and educational structure of this country, the black poor, the percentage of black people who are in poverty will stay the same. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. And the percentage of black people in the middle class is going to stay the same. That's unacceptable to me. That's not why Martin Luther King died. That's not why Malcolm was killed. That's not why we did the civil rights movement. That's not why, when I was admitted to Yale, I remember my parents bought me a new car because they wanted me to be among them, my mom said. Didn't want us to look, you understand that.
Pontiac, I hope.
Yeah, Pontiac. And the whole part of our black little Piedmont, West Virginia came out to wish me goodbye. Skippy, they said, good luck, Skippy, you representing the race. And you know what they said? But they said, if they don't treat you right up there, come on home. Come on home. That was a community, man. That's the way it was. And I knew that my performance at Yale, it was enabling for me. Some people have written, like Claude Steele writes about stereotype threat and the burden of representation. For me, it was empowering. But it was, what I'm trying to say is, attainment was a contribution to the civil rights movement. Going to Harvard, succeeding, that was a contribution to the civil rights movement. Getting into law school, getting into med school. That you were representing the race. You were showing racists that we were equal intellectually. You were showing that we were prepared for citizenship, that we could comport ourselves with dignity, et cetera, et cetera. That burden's still on a lot of black people. They don't talk about it, but it's still there.
One of the poets that does that, and you've taught at the Du Bois Center, is Langston Hughes, because everything he does seems to echo, echoes today.
The most widely read black poet in history is Langston Hughes.
And we had one of our young poets, and then Bobby McDuffie, the violinist, asked him to put a video together on his poem. I'd love to show it and maybe have you comment on it.
That's great.
If we can.
Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love, where never kings connive, nor tyrants scheme that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker, soul to machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean. Hungry yet today, despite the dream, beaten yet today. Oh, pioneers, I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker bartered through the years. Yet, I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream in the old world, while still a serf of kings who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings in every brick and stone and every furrow turned that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lea, and torn from black Africa's strand, I came to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we've dreamed and all the songs we've sung and all the hopes we've held and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay, except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose, the steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again, America. Oh yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me. And yet, I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we, the people, must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain, all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again.
Wow, that's dynamite. That's great. That's beautiful. Remember, that was written in 1935.
Which is what shocks me.
It's amazing. Yeah. And, God, you got to do something with that video.
Well, we just did and will. And one of our, we have a group, I don't know if any of the poets in the group who did it are here, but if you are, raise your hands or stand up or whatever. Yeah, thank you all. Sorry? And? Yeah. Well, Kitty is the one who put this together. Thank you.
God, well, if you, yeah, where's Kitty?
You can bring that back to the Du Bois Center.
I wish I knew someone at PBS to help you get that broadcast. But that's beautiful.
They'll do it. You just need to get the sponsors.
Yeah, well,
PBS.
We can help it. No, that's beautiful. And look at all the themes that we've been talking about that are embedded in that poem. One thing that struck me particularly was that the class interest of white people, working class white people, black people, who should have embraced each other. And black people tried to embrace their white working class counterparts, and the structures of racism militated against that. Why? Because that would be a formidable force.
And that
poor white people and poor black people agreeing, man, whoa, the rafters would shake.
And that was populism from the 30s when that poem was written?
Yeah.
You said 30, right?
Yeah,
30s,
35.
35. To maybe the 40s and 50s, even, you know, the Huey Longs and others, were poor working whites and poor working blacks together. And then the race card gets played.
Yeah, but you always had the problem of the majority figures. You know, black people were concentrated in the states that became the Confederacy, right? And if they all voted, there would be a huge shift in power. They had the numbers if they all voted as a bloc, but most of the wealth was controlled by white people, going back to the planter economy.
Do you think there's ever a possibility in the next 10, 20 years of a progressive populist movement that includes working whites and working blacks? Or poor
If you
blacks?
tried to do it today, if you called the election today, no. Donald Trump would still win. But when the dream, the utopia that Trump articulated and persuaded a significant percentage of people to believe doesn't materialize, then what's going to happen? What about the people back home in West Virginia? What are they going to do? They can't keep voting for politicians who have agendas that don't really represent them. They have this illusion now, it's like goober dust has been sprinkled over them, that they're going to go back to good old days when white people are on top and blah, 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 blah. And all these immigrants and people wear these funny scarves around their head, they're going to go away. You know, it's just not going to happen. So then that will be the moment of intervention. That will be when the great leader, male or female, black or white, a coalition, the coalition is the way to think of it. When it arises, and it realizes that race and class are different aspect of the same thing.
But Bill Clinton was able to pull that off. How come nobody else?
Bill Clinton was able to do it because he had a tremendous amount of charisma, and he actually believed that a rising tide lifts all boats. Now, a lot of people in the black community turned against Bill Clinton because they thought that he was, and Barack too, that they thought that neither was introducing legislation that would have a disproportionate impact positively on the black community. Clinton said, no, I think the problems are class-based. So rising tide will lift all boats. And it worked. Under Bill Clinton, we had the lowest unemployment rate we had in a long, long time, the lowest child poverty rate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Things were getting much better. What happened with Clinton was Monica Lewinsky, and everything, you know, his administration was frozen for 2 years. So a lot of those programs never materialized, and then what happened after that, you know, George W. So
tell us about the show and what's next so we can look forward with some hope.
Well, we have the new season of Finding Your Roots airs in October, 10 episodes. Yeah, give it up for that, please. Thank you. I don't know if it's the first episode chronologically, but one of my favorites is Bernie Sanders and Larry David. Wait till you see that. It is so hilarious. And then, you know, we're using DNA in much more creative ways. And we you know Taya Leone, Madam Secretary? Taya Leone's mother was adopted 6 months after she was born in Texas. And we actually have used DNA to find Taya Leone's mother's birth mother and birth father. And Taya Leone's birth mother, Taya breaks down and cries. You know, we show her identity, show her a picture. She said, oh my God, she looks just like my mother. Then she says, a very moving part, she says, when did she die? I said, she didn't. She's living in Louisiana. She's 96 years old. So they just had a reunion about 2 weeks ago, and we're going to interview her in a couple weeks, you know, about that. And then we have great stories. I love doing Jewish immigration because it's as hard as doing, I mean, Jewish genealogy, which is based on immigration, because it's as hard doing the genealogy of Eastern European Jews as to do black people. There's a paper for the same reason. It's easy to do Ashkenazi Jews DNA analysis, but it is very, very difficult to recreate their family trees. And we've had some amazing successes with that. And we're doing more and more Muslims and Hindu people and Asians, and I love it.